Hi. Hey. How are you, Hannah? I'm doing great. Let's not talk about school because it's very stressful right now. All right. First of all, I want to thank all you guys for being here tonight. I think I say this every single week, but it's a lot more fun when there are people here than if there are no people here. We'll be here either way, whether it's 5 or it's 50, but it's a lot more fun whenever you all show up. And I love seeing y'all here. Okay, so do you guys remember what we talked about last week? Matthew. Stop. Do you guys remember the title of it? Right. You don't remember the title?
Be a sellout.
Right. Call me a sellout. Can you put that up, Doris? Guys, guess what? I actually did it for a second week. Are you proud of me? I don't think I've ever accomplished this. I'm pretty proud of myself, to be honest. I guess I just really like this graphic. It's really cute. I'm just kidding. I like the theme, and so I'm gonna stick with it for this lesson as well. Boys, if I have to call your names again, I will move you, one of you on each front row. Okay? Thank you. All right. Listen, I do children's church on Sunday mornings, so I used to be afraid to like tell you guys you have to move or something because I want you to like me, but now I'm just like, you're going over here. Okay? So I will move you. Matthew, you know, you're in children's church. Okay. Anyway, breathe, calm down. We're getting started. Okay. So I want to start this off with a question. A question for each and every one of you guys. Each and every one of you who are saved. Raise your hand if you would say you're saved, first of all. Just so I can see who I'm talking to, you know. It's very troubling to me that not a lot of you teenagers raised your hands, but don't worry, we'll talk about it. So I have a question for you guys. Why did you decide to become a Christian? Think about it in your head. Why did you decide to become a Christian? What made you say, I want to turn my life around, I want to follow Jesus? What made you decide that? Sometimes, for those of us like me, honestly, I remember being in church my entire life. So people like me, or even people that maybe weren't in church their entire lives but got saved 20 years ago or a long time ago, even if you got saved a few years ago, sometimes it's hard for us to remember what made us choose to follow Jesus. We're talking about being sold out for Christ, right? Is that what this says? Call me a sellout, right? That's why I put that up there, so you guys have this point in your face all the time, so you won't forget, even though you already forgot from last week. I'm hoping by next week you'll remember, okay? So we're talking about being sold out for Christ. And that's a really hard thing to accomplish when you can't even remember why you came to him in the first place, right? So sometimes it's nice to go back to the basics, to go back to that turning point in your life. I'm not saying that we have literal, like, short-term memory loss or that we actually forgot when we got saved or why we got saved. I'm just saying sometimes we lose focus on that. Sometimes that's not the first thing on our minds. That season where it was really bad or we really needed Jesus and we found Jesus or he found us and we got saved, right? Sometimes that's not what we're thinking about in the moment. Life is full of so many different things. We all know this. We just had fall break. And I don't know, I don't remember, I don't think in high school it was as bad, but in college, after fall break, everything is due. Everything is due. And during fall break, you do none of it. So you get to school and you're like, oh, I probably should have done some of this homework. So it's a little bit stressful, right? We have life, we have jobs, we have school. It's full of so many different things that distract us from our walk with God. Just a fact of life. We're distracted constantly, every single day. And sometimes we just need to shift our focus a little bit. We talked about this last week. Guys, calm down. You guys are getting too excited with that water bottle over there. Okay. So last week, if you guys remember, I don't know if you remember, what did we talk about shifting our focus to? Like what was what we were focusing on that we need to shift our focus to something else? You guys remember? You don't even remember the sellout part, so I don't really have high hopes for you. Amos, you're my question guy. Do you remember? No? That's okay. I'll tell you. So last week we talked about shifting our focus from people, right? People and pleasing the world to pleasing who? God, right. So we talked about shifting our focus from looking at the people around us to looking at God, right? Sometimes we also, though, this is what we're going to talk about today, we need to shift our focus from what we're doing to why we're doing it. I don't know about you guys, but I personally have a really hard time if someone tells me, you have to do this thing. And I'm like, why? And they have no answer. Matthew, come sit right here by Kenny. Right here. At the end over here. Okay, anyway, so I'm not good at people just demanding that I do something without giving me an explanation. I need to know where this is going, what purpose this has, why it's important for me to do it, right? How about you guys? In school, how many of you well, some people do like this, but how many of you like being given an assignment that makes absolutely no sense for your class? And when you say, why are we doing a worksheet on counting change when we're in an English class? Right? How many of you guys get, I remember getting those all the time. Your teacher's tired or they forgot to plan for that day and you have a sub and they could just give them a random worksheet, right? How many of you guys are kind of like, why do I have to do this? And be honest, how many of you don't do it? Right, that's what I thought. I always did it because I was afraid of getting a bad grade, but if there's no reason to do it, it's kind of hard to motivate yourself, right? Last week we talked about having to come to church, right? So we feel like we have to come to church maybe because we have a job in the church, or maybe because it's expected that we're there. But that is what we're doing. So I come to church on Wednesdays and I play the piano. That's what I'm doing. But what happens if I lose focus on why I'm doing it? If I lose focus on the why of what I'm doing, it becomes really hollow, really fast. So I just want to talk about a couple things. I only have 5 minutes. In children's church, as I talked about before, we're going through the disciples. You remember Matthew? The disciple song? Yeah. So we're going through the disciple song, right? There are 12 disciples. That one? I love that song. Okay. But, we realized that we didn't learn some of these things till we were older. So we're trying to, teach this to children's church. We're going through the song, person by person. And we first talked about Peter. And I think Peter is one of the all-star disciples, Like if you ask somebody who their favorite disciple is, lots of people say Peter. And he's also one of my favorite disciples, but if anyone was sold out for Jesus, I think we can safely say that Peter was. He was so sold out for Jesus that when they came to arrest Jesus in the garden, he cut a guy's ear off. I think that's pretty, we talked about being sold out for Jesus means doing anything and everything for Jesus. I don't know how many of us would actually go that far to cut off a guy's ear, right? Amos, you would? Well, Peter was like that though. He believed and loved and trusted Jesus so much that he wanted to protect him. And Peter was sold out for Christ, yet he made a really big mistake. So we're going to read John 18 and 25. I think that's right. I feel like I wrote it down wrong. Oh, okay. So this is right. So Peter has already denied Jesus once. How many times does Peter deny Jesus? 3 times. So this is just one of them, and I'll read it. Now Simon Peter stood and warmed himself. Therefore they said to him, "You are not also one of his disciples, are you?" He denied it and said, "I am not." So we've heard this story so many times. Peter denies Jesus 3 times. Peter first leaves Jesus as he's being crucified. But almost all the disciples did that. He denied even knowing Jesus 3 times, just as Jesus said he would. If you know the story, Jesus has told Peter before, "You're going to deny me 3 times." If Peter was so sold out for Jesus a few days earlier, when he cut this guy's ear off, it was literally a day, 2 days earlier. He was so sold out for Jesus a few days earlier that he was willing to cut off someone's ear. Then why would he deny him? Right? Another one of my favorite disciples, we'll go back to Peter in a second, is Thomas. Now, when we talk about Thomas, what's the first thing that comes to mind? Doubting Thomas. Oh, it makes me so sad. I feel so bad for Thomas. I talked about Thomas last week in children's church. I just feel so bad for him because he's known as Doubting Thomas. I mean, come on, that's so sad. Thomas was sold out for Jesus. He was a disciple for 3 years. Jesus' ministry was about 3.5 years. So he was there from almost the very beginning. He was sold out for Jesus. He followed Jesus to the very end. But Thomas is known for being Doubting Thomas. I'm trying to go through this list. And I won't read this because we don't have enough time, but in the story, Thomas is out getting supplies and food for the disciples. What are the disciples doing in this story? They're locked in a house because they're terrified that they're going to be killed because Jesus just got crucified. So Peter was the one that went out. Not Peter. Thomas is the one that went out and got the supplies. And he's coming back to the guys. But while Thomas is gone, Jesus shows himself to the disciples. And Thomas gets back, and the disciples are like, "Wow, Thomas, we just saw Jesus. Can you believe it? Everything he said was true." And Thomas is like, "Okay, I'll believe it when I see it." Actually, he says, "I'll believe it when I can touch his wounds." Now, let's be honest with ourselves. I asked this question in children's church, and of course, in children's church, all their hands went up. I was like, how many of you guys would really believe that someone you knew was dead came back to life? If someone just told you, if you didn't see it yourself. And they were all like, I don't think I would, right? I mean, I know they walked with Jesus. I know Jesus told them that he was the Messiah and that he was going to come back to life, but that is hard to believe. It's not an easy thing to believe that someone just can come back to life. Thomas was not the only one who doubted Jesus. All of these disciples left Jesus when he was being crucified. They doubted who he was. They doubted what he told them. They left Jesus and they were like, well, we're going to be killed now. Even though Jesus had said that wasn't going to happen, right? They all doubted Jesus. Thomas is just the one that vocalized it. Thomas was sold out for Jesus, and all the disciples were, but he lost his focus when his faith was tested. Peter took his focus off Jesus and everything he taught him, and he started focusing on everything that was happening around him. Thomas was with Jesus in his ministry for 3 years. But when Jesus died, he too took his focus from everything he had seen, everything he'd been told, everything he knew about Jesus, and he set his eyes on what was happening around him, on his reality. When we look away from God and we turn to what we think is possible versus impossible, we begin to lose our focus on why we chose to follow Jesus in the first place. Peter and Thomas physically walked with Jesus. They physically walked with Jesus. He sat face to face with them and told them these things. They saw him perform miracles and they witnessed his ministry firsthand, and even they lost their focus. their faith was tested and they faltered in their walk a little bit. These guys were sold out for Jesus, there's no doubt about it. But they still had to reevaluate and reset their lives. And I'm guessing this wasn't a one-time thing. I'm guessing this wasn't the only time they kind of lost their focus and they had to go back. If we look at our walk with Christ through what other people think of us or what we can accomplish or what we believe is possible, we're going to have a very hard time. In order to be sold out for Christ, we have to know why we're doing what we're doing. We have to believe in what we're doing. It's hard to fake it. Fake it till you make it is great in some things, but it's really, really hard in church. It's draining. It's detrimental to your walk with God. Faking it. When we know where our focus is and who our faith comes from, we can truly be sold out. But even these guys who knew Jesus, who physically walked with Jesus, who looked him in the eyes and knew he was the Messiah, even they lost their focus. And they had to reevaluate and they had to readjust. So when we're making that decision, and I'll end with this because I'm past time. When we're making that decision to follow Jesus and we're making the decision to say, I'm going to be sold out, I'm going to do whatever it takes, that doesn't mean that we're off the hook, right? It doesn't mean that we're not going to be distracted or that things are going to happen in our lives that we need to say, okay, I got to work through this. I need help with this. And we're going to have to reevaluate sometimes. We're going to have to shift our focus sometimes. It's going to happen. But when we're sold out for Christ, we want to do those things. We want to be held accountable. We want to have a good walk with Jesus. We want to trust him. We want to love him. We want to know more about him. So we will do whatever it takes to reevaluate and refocus. So this week, for those of you who are saved or those of you who are thinking about getting saved and you just haven't made the decision yet, I want you to think about where your focus is. Is your focus on, I can't do this because they'll think I'm weird, or they'll think I'm stupid, or what if I'm wrong? What if this God stuff isn't real? Or is your focus on, I am going to find out for myself, no matter what anybody thinks. I'm going to follow Jesus because Jesus is the only one that can answer my questions and help me with my problems. I want you this week to think about where your focus is, because that is going to be where you're headed, right? You can't look over here and walk this way very easily. So I want to leave you guys with that. This week, check your focus, reevaluate where you're at, think about what you want. And we'll come back next week and we'll talk about it some more, okay? All right, thank you.